music is getting worse, Mike.
What's happening? That music's getting worse.
Well, that is what Rick Beato says in his recent video.
I saw that he posted that, but I was wondering what it was about.
The title is actually The Real Reason Why Music is Getting Worse.
And why is that? Because people don't have their music being talked about by the adult music podcasts, of course, right?
Actually, there's two reasons or two parts to his explanation.
Okay.
The first one, we don't really have to worry about here at Adult Music. And
okay.
Rick Beato's mainly talking about pop music,
right?
Which I really don't listen to much anymore. So the first reason is that music is too easy to make.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I think what he means are all of the digital tools that are there, many of which are used to sort of compensate for maybe talent, but also people get obsessive with their use. He gives the example of correcting drum beats so they're perfectly synced in time. Right. And then things just end up sounding mechanical, right? There's no humanness left to them. And of course, the horrendous auto-tune.
That's the worst. That's really what put me off pop music. I just hate hearing that. Right. And it's not because it's just tuning the voice. I mean, they like that because it sort of distorts the voice. It kind of makes it sound like a robot. And I don't even like that.
I don't like that
I'd rather hear a natural voice.
And I'd like to hear the natural sort of flow and swell of rhythms and things like that. We don't really have to worry about that with classical and jazz music because it's not really any easier to make those styles of music. It may be easier to record, and in that sense, it's a good thing because more artists can get their music out there.
Well, classical music, I know, is more expensive to record, so there's been a lot of cutting back on big orchestra recordings, and especially operas. They're usually recorded live now.
Now, the second part of his explanation is that music is too easy to consume. And so this part, I do kind of agree with.
Yeah, me too.
Music is available at just a touch of a device these days for almost no charge, sometimes free, depending on what sound quality you want. But especially with young people who grew up with that capability. I guess Spotify has been around since 2012. So you have a whole generation of young people, many of whom I talk to every day. And the idea of spending money for music or that music takes some effort to get is foreign to them. And so for our generation growing up, you had to either spend your money on music or you had to go search for it. I had to go to the library and borrow records if I wanted to hear jazz because it wasn't played on the radio. And if you had told me when I was 12 or 13, someday you can sit on the sofa and just touch a device that will bring all the music of history instantly into your room, it would have been science fiction, right?
Not only that, it would have been great at that point because there wasn't as much music as there is now. Now we're just like flooded with it.
So I can understand that. I, heard an interview with Alex Sipiagin, the Russian trumpeter, who talked about how jazz was banned in the former Soviet Union.
Right.
And you weren't allowed to listen to it. So they had this sort of secret network of passing on copies of tapes that were copied and copied.
Right.
To listen to music was a real effort to get the kind of music they wanted to listen to. And that, or just in general, having to spend your money on music gives you an appreciation for it. That'll always stay with me. I still get excited every morning waking up searching for the new releases because I'm so amazed at this ability.
By the way, I want to point out that that's a reason why you don't want to live in a communist authoritarian state because you just can't listen to the music you want to.
Right. That's another good reason.
If I lived in an authoritarian state and I could listen to anything I wanted to, that would be okay. Just because as long as no one bothered me and I could do that, I'd be okay. But that's generally not the way it goes.
Anyway, the only downside I see to the easy consumption is that there's so much music that it's overwhelming where to start.
Right.
But that's why we're here to help you at Adult Music, where we bring you music for the mature mind. I'm your co-host, Russ.
I'm your co-host, Mike.
And we sort through all of these new releases in classical and jazz anyway. You can get your pop recommendations from Rick Beato.
Yeah. He's generally old school, though. He'll go back to the 80s and 90s. There's also a guy on YouTube called Professor of Rock. And he pretty much hangs out in the 70s and 80s and talks about like hit songs from that period. Oh, man. Talk about something more recent, Professor.
Well, we're all about classical and jazz and recent recordings. Try to bring you fresh stuff, 3 of each genre each week.
Yeah, technically we're about anything we would consider to be adult music, but we generally haven't gone into like more sophisticated popular music or world music or anything like that.
Once in a while we cross over into world music. But actually, this program we have tonight is going to have some pop influences.
Yeah, this is a pop-influenced program.
Not necessarily all American pop either. Anyway, we'll get to that when we get there. Before we get into this week's program, I want to give a big thanks to pianist Antonio Forao for sharing our episode on his Facebook page last week. He's got 10,000 Facebook followers, Mike.
Wow.
And he's a very prolific poster. So we got a few extra likes from that. And be sure to check out his recording tributes that we featured in last week's episode if you want to hear some amazing jazz piano playing.
10,000 followers. He's got as many followers as I've got CDs.
Yeah. All right, as always, in the episode description, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and now Amazon Music as well for all the music that we're going to talk about tonight. At the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality, streaming music from France. You can catch the podcast on Deezer as well if you want to get everything in one place. Now, wherever you listen to us, sometimes the links don't show up neatly or they're hard to follow on some apps. Remember, you can always come over to our host site, Podbean, podbean.com, where everything is easy to follow. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to us and tell a music-loving friend. Help us grow our audience.
Yeah, definitely help us grow our audience because we need that to happen.
You can also consider giving us a ranking or write a short review. That helps us get listed in the recommendations in the music categories. It's another way people can find out about us. You can come follow us on our Facebook page as well to get extra info and new releases throughout the week. You can leave a message or comment there as well. See our interaction with the musicians and artists. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. Remember to check out our friends AJ and Johnny's podcast as well. That's the same difference, two jazz fans, one jazz standard podcast, where they look at several versions of a single jazz standard in each episode. They play you little samples of the original and the versions, talk about the history, say what they like and don't like, and mix in a lot of humor as well. There's a link to their podcast in the description, and if you stick around to the end of our episode, you can hear their promo. I think it's time we get together with those guys again, maybe before the fall, Mike.
Before the fall? Okay. We can
September or so. Yeah, we should do another episode together.
Yeah, we definitely need to do another episode together.
And we're going to play some samples tonight from the music we're going to talk about, and this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. We also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists.
Just want to say that if you're ever going to get a guest on your podcast, if it's one person, you have like 3 people to the first power chance of doing that. But then with each guest you add, it goes up by powers, not by
That's right. Yeah.
levels of difficulty in getting everybody together, even on the internet, because everybody's time zone is different and they have different lives and different jobs and all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, and then you got to hope you don't have a technical glitch.
There's that too. Russ and I are complete lunatics. We live in Japan. We will get up at 3 a.m. to talk to someone. So
no problem.
Yeah, as long as you have to do it every week, I'll do it once.
Yeah. All right, where are we going to start the classical adventure tonight, Mike?
This week, next week, I'm going to be a bit off the beaten track. When people think classical music, they think, oh, Vivaldi, Mozart, Brahms. And I've tried to get a few of those in this year. But again, we're mostly composers that most people don't know about. And that might be the case tonight, too. In fact, it definitely is the case tonight.
Great.
Yeah, always good. And I said we were more in a pop vein, but we're going to start out in the Baroque era. This would not be really pop. This would be straight Baroque. And that is music of Dietrich Buxtehude. Now, I'm always kind of programming Italian Baroque. This is German Baroque, pre-Bach. In fact, Buxtehude was one of Bach's big inspirations.
Right.
It's said that he once traveled many kilometers to hear Buxtehude play the organ when Bach was a young man. Anyway, here we don't have any organ music by Buxtehude. We have trio sonatas, the violin, viola da gamba, and harpsichord. This album is called Alchemy of Another, Trio Sonatas Opus 1. And it's by an ensemble called Filament. And they feature Evan Few on the violin, Elena Kaufman on viola da gamba, and John Walthausen on harpsichord. This is on Bridge Records and released May 17th. I'm still in May. June wasn't a big release month in classical music for some reason. I don't know what's going on there, but I did get a few from June. We'll be hearing them pretty soon. So Filament are from Philadelphia. I'm wondering if they didn't call themselves Filament because the Philadelphia,
you know.
They formed in 2019. Oh, good timing, guys. Right before the COVID.
Great.
Hey, let's form an ensemble, and then right away you just can't perform. So there are collectives. These aren't the only 3 members that we're hearing on this album. So I guess that means we'll hear more of them, in future albums. Right. The 7 sonatas in Buxtehude's Opus 1 were the first works that Filament played together as an ensemble. So this music is integral to their common work. And I've heard this album. I'm going to be playing it for you. And let me just tell you right ahead, I'll just give you the punchline. They really have a good feeling for this music. It sounds really great. And it's a great recording, too. The cover of the album, by the way, features a furnace and a chemical apparatus, which looks like glass jars you'd see in a lab. So filament, I guess, for a light bulb. But this is supposed to be alchemy. There's an alchemy theme. And I have to say, I don't understand why. The album is called Alchemy of Another. The booklet note doesn't say anything about that. So I really don't know where they got this theme from. Maybe they got their alchemy together by playing these, since he was the first composer they played. I don't know.
Or they make up titles like we do.
Yeah, could be. Anyway, Filament members, you can get in touch with us and let us know why you called this album Alchemy of Another. We'll mention it next week. Anyway, the booklet notes are extremely helpful. Good work, Bridge Records and Filament. They outline the compositional qualities of each work, which is unusual for a Baroque recording. But, of course, it's welcome. Now, Baroque music can easily just fade into the background as you're doing other things. But if you listen to it, it's really, really interesting. Right. And the notes bring us a little closer, because then when the players discuss what's happening, it's a little more detailed and there's more to kind of think about. And I really enjoyed that. Anyway, let's get into this. This is 7 sonatas, and we're starting out with Sonata 3 in A minor. They don't play these in order. They've sort of programmed them, I guess, by mood or something. This starts out, interestingly enough, with a 4-movement work. It's an adagio. I guess this would be a church sonata form, starting with a slow movement. And this is the only sonata in Buxtehude's Opus 1 that begins with a slow movement that's not transitional. There are other sonatas that begin with a slow movement, but it sounds like it's leading in. It's like an intro to the faster part. That's not the case here. This is a standalone slow movement. It's an interesting way to start the program. Usually you want to start with something a little sunny and bouncy and bring the listener in. But they're going to tease us a little bit. The harmony in this is stagnant, and it establishes A as the tonal center, according to the notes, and according to my ear. I picked this up too. I didn't know A, but I knew it was like establishing a key pretty solidly. It starts with a harpsichord chord, followed by moaning, drawn-out lines on the violin, and then on the viola da gamba and violin playing counter melodies. And this is the first we get to hear of Filament. Let's enjoy this. I'm going to have to get out of it. There was a nice little tricky key change in there that I rather enjoyed too. The second movement, Allegro and then Lento Vivace, starts like a fugue, but instead reveals a playful and structurally free concertato texture. This starts dancing almost right away, so let's hear the opening of the second movement. Yeah, really great ensemble work there. They have a bouncy rhythm. They've got this folk-like tone to the melodic material, and it breathes extremely well. This is a really great performance. It's a little bit laid back, relaxed. We kind of talked about that with Rachel Podger last week or the week before.
Right.
they're sort of in that too. They're not really playing for virtuosity as much as they are for just getting the right feel. It feels fantastic. I really enjoyed listening to this. So this is a great contrast to the first movement, and there's nice interplay between the two string instruments. The lento begins at about 1 minute and 55 seconds. Remember, there are 3 sections to this kind of brief movement, really, and sounds like a meditative rest between dances. There's some pretty cool descending chromatic passages, too. The vivace starts almost imperceptibly and features downward winding lines. An appealing movement full of great musical ideas, and the ensemble draws them out beautifully. The third movement, a slow movement, largo, is transitional. It continues in a 2-voiced contrapuntal and imitative texture. The harmonic center is moved via chromaticism back to a cadence in the original key, which is A minor. It's brief at 47 seconds. Its purpose is to lead us into the presto, really. The chromatic line is played with a moaning tone in the strings, and then we go to the fourth and final movement, presto, and ending adagio lento, which is kind of interesting. It's got a swift tempo and busy parts for all 3 players at the opening. It's playful until about the 1 minute and 30 second mark, when loudly wailing downward chromatic lines, now this is loud for Baroque music, so it's not loud, okay, lead to the final chord. I should just say forte. It's an interesting work and an ear-catching beginning to the program, so well done. Tracks 5 through 8 are the movements of Sonata 1 in F major, so this is the first in the publication. And here the viola da gamba has a dual role as a sometimes independent and sometimes bass voice. The piece starts vivace and moves to lento. In fact, it's on 4 tracks, but it's really in 8 or maybe 7 sections. Fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow. It's got a dotted rhythm opening in the vivace, which quickly heads to an amiable melody in the violin and viola da gamba. The harpsichord is recorded dryly, and I like the way this throws it into relief. There's a cadence at 1 minute and 5 seconds, followed by the transitional lento, which features a wavering, repeated chord figure. The second movement, allegro, moving to adagio. I shouldn't call these movements, I should call them sections, really. So this is really the third section, allegro, has a lovely counterpoint between the violin and viola da gamba here. I could sample that. Let's listen to it. Nice little cadence there. So this is played lively but not too fast. It's played with a lot of taste. It's a word I don't use often enough, and we're hearing it here, and we've heard it in a few other recent recordings as well. This ensemble has really good taste in their choice of tempos and the way they balance their lines. Track 7 features the andante moving to the grave, and this is played at a pleasant walking speed. Andante really means like to go or going, so it would mean like walking speed basically. So they hit the right tempo here, and it comes up breathing superbly. Let's listen to this too. Notice how even in the repeated notes, they get expression out of the way the individual notes are articulated. I really like that. This is really good playing. The harpsichord continuo in this movement is spare in its harmony. It rather walks along with the violin's melody. And at 2 minutes and 11 seconds, the grave starts, and it also is transitional, sounding like fanfares in its rising theme. We get to track 8, which is the final section, presto. It's short and brisk. There's some impressive ensemble by the strings here, who play in a rushing melody that sometimes enters into a call and response with the harpsichord. And this presto remains in high spirits throughout. Tracks 9 through 11, Sonata 6. We're just jumping ahead in D minor. Track 9 is the first movement. It has a lot of sections to it, starting grave. So it opens with a transitional slow movement. Transitional, not self-standing by itself. Material leads directly to the allegro fugue, and we hear a bit of the free stilus fantasticus that we've talked about on previous episodes, and then a presto dance movement. The stilus fantasticus is more like an improvised sort of feeling, though it is composed. The opening sounds like it's a coiled spring ready to break into some kind of melody, and eventually we hear the allegro, and I'm going to start this sample with the allegro 50 seconds into the track. There's a quick little cadence there, and he keeps going. This breaks into a call and response material between the violin and cello, just before the second minute. A harpsichord gets a bit of a flourish, and with the strings playing in a stilus fantasticus style. The next allegro is very fast, almost like a lively Italian dance in 6/8. That would be a tarantella, I guess. There's a brief adagio, followed by the rapid dance again, and the movement ends with an adagio transition into the next movement, which is marked vivace and then moving to adagio. The adagio would be transitional. There are two fast sections followed by a transitional slow section. The harpsichord is lively here, with the violin playing melodic material above. A more rapid fast section follows. It's brief and suddenly slows as though the spring has unwound. Then a brief adagio provides cadence. Track 11, the third section, or the third movement, starts poco presto, moves to poco adagio, back to presto, and then finally lento. The fast movements in this section, or in this movement, are like gigs. There's a slow chromatic interlude between, and a slow coda with a Bacardi third ending. The gig has an unwinding quality to its melody. The poco adagio appears suddenly and unexpectedly. It's well transitioned into by the ensemble. The cadence doubles at the beginning of the next presto, in which the violin and viola da gamba play in unison. It sounds like the piece is over after the fast section, but there's a short lento section that provides a more lugubrious ending. Track 12, we have the entire Sonata 4 on a single track. This is in B-flat major. It's marked vivace, then allegro presto, then lento, and allegro vivace. So on this one track, we get one 4-section movement. It begins with a 2-voice texture. The thematic material in the harpsichord winds up being an ostinato figure. Boy, we're going to hear a lot of those later on on this episode. Anyway, the viola da gamba and violin floridly imitate the ostinato line. Oh, by the way, I should mention an ostinato line is a repeating line. It's a pattern that just keeps repeating. You can think about this in a rock songs often do this, especially in the bass line. If you think of Money by Pink Floyd, that's an ostinato bass line. The same pattern keeps repeating. The viola da gamba and violin floridly imitate the ostinato line, varying texture and meter. Though the slow section is transitional, it has more thematic substance than the other slow movements in Opus 1. The allegro at the end is playful, and the violin takes the lead. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but let's sample first. And then we get those more florid string lines. Really nice. I like the cheerful major tonality opening that we heard. With its sunny theme on the violin, it continues in this vein with the next lively melody in the allegro presto section, the ostinato line appealingly getting into the listener's head and playing in appealingly lively fashion by the ensemble. There's some impressive ornamented sections showing some virtuosity. We finally reach the key and mood-changing lento at 4 minutes and 37 seconds, which transitions the piece to something similar to the opening ostinato theme, except that here it continues into a melody. Very appealing, and I'd recommend sampling this entire work. It's got a catchy sunniness to it. Tracks 13 through 17, Sonata 5, in C major, starts vivace, the first movement or section. It's got a cheerful opening with repeated notes as a hook, which is an unusual kind of hook. It's just the same note repeated, but they're just played so beautifully here. Let's listen to this. Yeah, this ensemble handles those repeated notes so well. Sometimes you wonder, what to do with them to, make them register, but they, it almost comes across as a hook here.
Yeah, they're intriguing the way they play them.
They are, yeah. It's the attack, it's the spacing between them and the dynamic, a lot of variety in that. Track 14, movement 2, it has a violin solo moving to an allegro. The violin solo is a saraband, and it's accompanied by harpsichord, which fills out the harmony and follows the violin's melodic pattern. We move to track 15, the largo, which is angst-filled. There's a word. That's a really European feeling, isn't it? Angst. Anyway, the violin plays sustained tones along with the viola da gamba, while the harpsichord fills in harmony with rolled chords, and this transitions to track 16, the allegro. A serious, urgent dance with a dotted rhythm. Those familiar, rapid, repeated notes from the opening movement make an appearance. The movement dances in this style to the end. And then we have track 17, Adagio, moving to the allegro. There's some pretty harsh passing tones in this Adagio, which move with a repeated note melody. I love those harsh tones, though, in Baroque music. They're always so spicy. The transition to the allegro is brilliant, seamlessly taken by the violin. Violin and gamba share the melodic line, sometimes playing in unison. Tracks 18 to 22. Yeah, these Baroque albums have a lot of tracks. They're all very short. But anyway, Sonata 2 in G major has 5 sections to it, or actually more, but 5 tracks, let's say. Track 18 starts with a lento. This section is only 3 measures long, lasting 21 seconds, and it features a harpsichord flourish. We move to track 19, Vivace, moving to Adagio. The vivace is chromatic with a quasi-concerto texture. The slow section is transitional. There are a lot of odd tones in the violin, but it mostly pleasantly builds to higher, brighter tones, then melodically finds its way down again. It's a pretty busy movement, with the viola da gamba occasionally taking over. The adagio simply moves us to a new tonality, and it's got a teasing resolution. Track 20 is the allegro. It's a furious jig in the relative minor, which is E minor. This is the movement of this particular work that I was going to sample, so let's hear a bit of this. I kind of want to get out of that fast because it's only 44 seconds long and I want people to listen to it on their own, but that's how it starts. And they get a bit of the furiousness coming across. Track 21 is the largo, brings the work back to the original key of G major, and it's short at about 33 seconds. There's some melody in the violin and viola da gamba, and an attractive dissonance at one point. And then we get to track 22, arioso. This is the last movement. Serene ariosos with 4 variations. This proceeds in a stately manner when the opening theme is stated. The variations lighten the mood further. It's a genial movement. Then we're finally at the final sonata, which happens to be Sonata 7, the last sonata in the collection. This is in E minor. Track 23 features an allegro moving to a largo. The opening fugue ends on a half cadence, atypically. The largo resolves to E minor, and this starts with an attractive theme that takes time to play out, meaning the allegro. I'm going to sample a bit of this. Let's listen to this opening of Sonata 7. Those different key shadings that we get in these lines as they move from one chord to another. The viola da gamba joins in counterpoint later, an attractive interplay throughout by the ensemble. The largo drops to a lower tonality. We move to track 24, presto, then vivace, then adagio. This starts as a fugal menuet leading to a 4/4 vivace with no intermediary slow section. The vivace reaches a cadence in the relative major, G major. The slow section begins the key back to E minor. The movement dances like the opening of the first one. Here the violin and viola da gamba are sometimes in unison, but seem to keep close to each other when harmonizing. The viola da gamba gets a few brief moments in the spotlight here. The adagio here is strong-toned, especially in the violin. And finally, track 25, the last section, with the last three sections, poco presto to lento to prestissimo. The theme is dictated by its rhythm, and the slow movement is dramatic and makes way for a triple meter conclusion. The movement, piece, and set of sonatas ends abruptly. And I'd like to sample the theme dictated by the rhythm at the beginning, so you can hear what we mean by that. Good old Buxtehude. I'm glad Bach liked him so that we could hear him too. If Bach didn't like him, we probably wouldn't have rediscovered him. Anyway, in this album, Filament bring the music to vivacious, rhythmic life. The recording is brilliantly clear too, a bit on the dry side, so we get to enjoy every facet of this music. In fact, the dryness of the recording, I think, serves the recording and ensemble in this case. All of the instruments are given ample space to breathe in the acoustic, and part of that is the pacing. The pacing is really perfectly judged throughout this album. The faster movements positively dance and are comfortably paced so that they sound natural, not rushed in any way. In fact, transitions from slow to fast sections are expertly taken and often so natural that one doesn't notice the transition or marvels at it. Filament has an exceptionally comfortable feel for this music, and the album is a pleasant listen throughout. I really loved it, and this is something that you can just put on all the time. You can listen to it closely or put it in the back. It'll just make you feel good. It's a really great recording.
I thought this was great too. The compositions are intriguing with a lot of variety of moods from the varied tempos, different meters and modalities changing. You can easily understand why Bach was a big fan. The performances are very enjoyable too, bringing out the expression inherent in each piece and movement from sadness to joy. And I enjoyed the phrasing and interpretation, like you brought out the repeated notes, and they're always doing something to make it expressive. And the tonal combination of violin with the edgier viola da gamba was also really intriguing. I guess from reading the notes on the recording, this is kind of a musical crossroads where you have the earlier world of the viola da gamba and the newer violin kind of going to come in and take over. But here they are together, making some really fine music.
Yeah, soon the cello would replace the viola da gamba.
Right.
Very sad. Or maybe not. I don't know. The gamba had its day.
Yeah, I like the tone.
All right, so now we're going to move into the more pop-oriented material for the rest of the classical section here, and even some of the jazz, I think, as well. Yeah, it's kind of an unusual serendipity we have here tonight. So our second recording in classical music is music by Ernesto Lecuona, who is a Cuban composer, lived 1896 to 1963, and Louis Moreau Gottschalk, who was born in New Orleans in the USA, lived 1829 to 1869. So he was one of those composers who died fairly young. He was 40 years old. The album is called Dancing Tales. It's played by Linda Malgieri on the piano, and it's released by our new friends at Da Vinci Classics, who are quickly becoming a favorite label of ours. They're releasing quite a bit of intriguing music this year.
Unique stuff.
Yeah, I got to post more about them because they've got some. There are a lot of albums that we're not talking about that are also look or sound really good. Anyway, the pillar of this piano journey is the dominance of rhythm in African and African-derived music, according to the notes. Now, I'm going to have something to say about that at the end, so keep that in mind. The music of Lecuona and Gottschalk is derived from a combination of melodic lines, often related to popular songs, with Caribbean and in particular Afro-Cuban rhythms. Bass notes often evoke drums and percussion. And I want us to think of that too. Russ and I have both mentioned, especially when it comes to classical music, that whenever you're playing music from the Americas that's composed, you really have to keep in mind that the music is groove-oriented generally, which is not the case with European composed music. Now, they have a rhythm, but the groove really dictates how the music's going to move in the USA and in the Latin America as well. So let's think about that. The notes in this booklet, by the way, by Da Vinci Classics, are highly detailed and they're very helpful. I've summarized them here, but I would encourage you to read them. I want to mention, first of all, about Ernesto Lecuona. Many people probably remember the I Love Lucy show with like Ricky Ricardo, who was a Cuban band leader in a nightclub. And you'd watch this show, I guess in the 70s and 80s when I was a child, and wonder, why is this guy a Cuban? Well, in the 1950s, before the Castro years in Cuba, Cuban music was huge in the United States. People would go out, dance to it. It was competing with jazz for popularity. So we often forget that. We think about, say, jazz history, and we don't really think about the fact that there's a lot of other things going on at the same time, including rock music and these sorts of things. I think it's important to keep in mind. I remember there was music by Ernesto Lecuona in my piano bench growing up. None of those pieces are on this album. Yeah, he was really popular. Piano teachers used to teach his music. It's not easy either, but it is, as you'll notice, very loud. And Lecuona liked the quadruple F marking in his scores. And we're going to hear a lot of that. So when you hear these deafening fortissimos, or fortissimi, that's not the pianist going crazy. That's actually in the score to be played like that.
Right.
Anyway, let's listen to this. Tracks 1 through 4, Ernesto Lecuona, Piezas Características. These works belong to what biographers consider the third period of Lecuona's compositional activity, 1940 to 1963, mostly spent away from Cuba, as the freedom of expression and thought in Cuba was slowly suffocated by the rise of communism. These pieces showcase his ability to fuse traditional Cuban elements with a more classical form. Now, I'm talking off the top of my head here, but I'm pretty sure Lecuona, like Ricky Ricardo in I Love Lucy, was also a band leader. He wasn't just a composer, but he did write a lot of piano music and probably a lot of other music as well, all in a popular vein. And again, at this period, orchestral music, classical music was also sort of involved in the whole jazz, Cuban, rock and roll sort of mix. They were all kind of competing for people's attention. It wasn't like you liked one genre and not the other at the time. It was more of a melting pot back then. So first we have the Canto del Guajiro, and this was apparently written after Lecuona heard a gardener singing outside of his home in Cuba. It's a tribute to a Cuban farmer. Guajiro is a farmer, a Cuban farmer, who portrays the different parts of his rural day through his song. And there's an early morning theme that represents birds singing, Then he goes through the most energetic and busy part of the day, which we hear as the theme is doubled with sixths and octaves. Lecuona loves the octave. There are a lot of them in his music. Passing from higher to lower registers, and finally arrives, after a short cadenza, to the final part of the day, when he thinks nostalgically about his day in life. So right away I noticed that Linda Malgieri has the sort of lingering rubato way of unfolding the opening. The piece gets big and fortissimo right away, and then the main theme starts. I'm going to sample this from around the main theme, about 50 seconds into the track, so let's get there and hear this. And there are those octaves, which we hear all over Lecuona's music. He liked to really put this music across as loudly as possible. The rubato brings a lot of expressiveness to the line. Lecuona does like fortissimi and even fortississimi, and we get a few of them here. Separation of the rhythm and melody between the hands is well achieved, but I wonder if the wistful rubato doesn't break this up a bit. It's a satisfying performance, though. Track 2, La Habanera. Now, habanera is a dance from Cuba, from Havana. It's called habanera after Havana. This is an arrangement of a part of Lecuona's opera El Sombrero de Yare. This also has a reminiscence of the dance hall vibe in the way Malgieri plays it, with slight rubato. I think I'd like the rhythm to be more solidly lined up here. Malgieri's got a very romantic approach, and I have to say it works here. There is a nostalgic quality to Lecuona's writing, and he's not the most inventive of piano orchestrators, using octaves often for a strong melodic line. The real appeal in his music comes in the rhythm, in the kind of juxtaposed left and right hand, sort of not perfectly lined up sort of rhythm and melody. The habanera rhythm is easily discernible in this performance, so the character of this piece comes through. Track 3, Mazurka Glissando. This illustrates the European influence over Cuban music. Yes, this is very complicated. We often think of music from the Americas as being sort of African origin, but it's also, there's a lot of European music mixed in there too. It really was a big melting pot. Though this is a European dance, it's got a bit of a Caribbean spice to it. Let's listen to this. I have to say Malgieri has very nice scales. It's very even. Again, though, she adds a lot of rubato to the rhythm. At the 48-second mark, I like the way she suddenly plays with a dancing rhythm, lightly touching the keys. Track 4, Preludio en la Noche, captures a nocturnal atmosphere through expressive melodies, intricate harmonies, and rhythmic nuances that convey a sense of mystery and emotion. It's permeated by a Hollywood influence, Hollywood in quotation marks, and the piece comes across prettily, like a straightforward 19th century piece, perhaps by Chopin. Let's just give this a sample too. There's a nice chord change, like right at the beginning of that melody, that really does give it a sort of new world sound. The third minute of the piece, where the dynamic goes to pianissimo, is particularly lovely, and the ending of this piece shimmers. Malgieri sounds particularly at home in this piece. Tracks 5 through 10 are another set of pieces by Ernesto Lecuona, Danzas Afro-Cubanas. The first one is called La Conga de Media Noche. It's in binary form, and the title means the Midnight Conga. It's in 2/4 with a march rhythm. This is one of Lecuona's most dissonant works according to the notes. It has an interesting bell-like sonority at the beginning, and then a rhythm begins. This is really a bit unusual enough that I have to sample it. We go into a new section. The theme has a repetitive quality to it, as in a dance or popular song. Lecuona is using some unusual note combinations here, along with a compelling rhythm, and Malgieri puts it across well. She reins in the romantic elements we heard in the first 4 works in this particular one, and really in this whole set, but they do appear at times. We get some trademark Lecuona fortissimi at the end. Track 6, the second dance in this set, Danza Negra. This dance and the rest of the dances are in ternary form, so A, B, A. You're going to hear the opening section repeat at the end. This dance is gentle and charming with a dreamy melody. There's a light dance melody to it, and it's very attractive. Let's hear a bit of this too. And just that hypnotic dance rhythm, just fantastic. There's a snappier middle section to this, fortissimo of course, and with another attractive melody. The opening then returns in this ternary form piece. Track 7, the third dance, Y la Negra Bailaba, and the Black Women Danced. This is fiery and full of energy, rumbling bass and a joyous theme in this, and I like the way Malgieri pulls back on the loud dynamics for what I guess would be the middle 8th section of the melody. At 1 minute and 20 seconds in, the B section begins. It's staccato with an intriguing overall rhythm and sound, and catchy too, and I'd like to sample that part. This is the B section of track 7. Yeah, Malgieri captures the character of this piece exceptionally well. The rhythm is fantastically realized too. Track 8 is the fourth dance, Danza de los Ñañigos. This and the next piece have a mystic and religious atmosphere to them. In this piece, the tribe appears in the comparsas and starts a pianissimo chant followed by a tribal dance. Now, a comparsa is a Cuban carnival procession. So the tribe appears in the carnival procession and start a pianissimo chant followed by a tribal dance. It's got a gentle, quiet opening, so that's where they appear from a distance, with a syncopated repeated chord and a light melody above that. Lecuona has a good ear for appealing melodies, you may have noticed. The middle section has a thunderous bass. Track 9 is the fifth dance, Danza Lucumi. This has a 2-bar ostinato with the bolero rhythm that accompanies an initial sorrowful chant that bursts into joyful music later on. This has an appealing ostinato bass line with an equally ear-friendly melody. Let's listen to this. It's all very song-like and doesn't come across as terribly sorrowful, as the notes claim. At 1 minute 15 seconds, a teasing staccato line is heard, setting the stage for the B section. When the opening song comes back, it's fortissimo and much more cheerful. Track 10, La Comparsa. The title refers to the yearly Cuban carnival procession. Here, all of the Afro-Cuban tribes approach the carnival procession and gather to dance, sing, and worship their gods. Yeah, you may have seen something similar to this in New Orleans, Mardi Gras, or in Brazilian Carnival with all the samba dancers. This also starts with an ostinato bass line, played mostly staccato. The melody is stretched out. The piece is rather short, in around 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and comes across strongly as a dance. The texture thickens by the middle of the piece with octaves and louder volume. I thought these 6 dances came across as the best performances on the album, especially rhythmically. We then go to the works by Louis Moreau, Gottschalk, and these 4 pieces that are included here are known together as the Louisiana Quartet. They were all written during his early period in Europe between 1844 and 1849. Yeah, a little bit about Louis Moreau Gottschalk. He was a virtuoso pianist, and he incorporated all of these American and sort of Caribbean rhythms into his music. Wound up going to Europe and really wowed the composers who lived there. You know, Chopin really liked his playing a lot. He then traveled around the world playing until he eventually died at age 40. That's kind of a canned biography. There's more interesting things to say about him, but there you go. Anyway, the first piece here is called Bamboula, Danse de Nègre, Opus 2. It's an African dance permeated by the habanera rhythm. Now remember habanera, Havana, that's Cuban. The bamboula is a kind of drum made of bamboo. This is a pretty well-known work by now. You may not have heard it though, so let's just sample the beginning. It's got a very percussive quality to it. Malgieri gets a thunderous sound on the bass notes at the beginning, again with the piano rattling inside the soundboard. There are complicated rhythmic patterns in the theme, making the piano sound like the whole band with its repeated notes and inner-voiced melodies. Overall, though, the melody and harmony are pretty simple. It's the rhythm and dance-like quality that come across most strongly. Malgieri plays this at a danceable speed, meaning she's not rushing, and the rhythm sounds comfortable and inviting. It sounds like a lot of pedal is being used, so some of the inner voices don't register as sharply as they could. But no matter, the overall rhythm comes across. Again, Malgieri adds a bit of rubato during the repetitive sections for expression, and in this piece it works well. At 3 minutes and 19 seconds, a more romantic, song-like section starts after a pause. Malgieri plays this with subtlety, not going for the grand gesture during louder sections. Again, she adds quite a bit of rubato, which would have been in keeping with the time, I suppose. At the 7-minute mark, we get a new section again after a repeat of the main theme. I feel like the slower section of this work could use a steadier, less rubato-laden rhythm. Malgieri lays the rubato on pretty heavily here. When the opening theme returns again at the end, Malgieri gives it a grand, sweeping profile. I feel like she loses a bit of the electricity that this piece can generate by the end, though. Track 12, Gottschalk's La Savane, Ballade Creole, Opus 3. This is a theme and variations in E-flat minor. It starts slowly as a song. We hear a melody at the opening, repeated after a long pause. Here it sounds like Malgieri is using the una corda pedal to get a cushioned sound on the melody. At the 49-second mark, the melody picks up some energy from the staccato bass line for a moment. The melody, when it fully emerges, has a haunting quality to it. The opposing piano figuration gets pretty complicated as the melody repeats. In the 4th minute, Malgieri gets a raindrop quality out of her tone, but again, I think the tempo here is too slow. We're not getting enough of a sense of the rhythm driving the piece. I think it could have been a bit more on the excitable side. It keeps slowing down as it goes and reaches an end that sounds like a lament, but with a sudden brief outburst on the last chord. Track 13, Gottschalk's La Bananier, Chanson Nègre, Opus 5. Bananier is a banana tree, so the name of this piece is The Banana Tree. This has a hammering ostinato repeated chord, which the folk song-like melody is played over. The rhythm is in sharper profile in this performance, and this comes across as a set of variations as well, and there's some inventive piano writing and fancy fingerwork required to play it here to set off the theme. Let's hear the opening of this piece. Track 14, the final piece on the album, La Manzanilla, a serenade, Opus 11. This means the manchineel tree, which is a Caribbean tree that has acrid, apple-like fruit and poisonous milky sap that can cause temporary blindness. Boy, let me tell you. This has an appealingly light rhythm and theme at the beginning. The main rhythm starts at 40 seconds, and it mostly features a repeating chord with the melody over it. Again, the rhythm could be better sprung, and I feel like the American folk song quality of the rhythm and of the melody don't really quite come across. I'm going to give you a sample of this so you can see for yourself what I mean. Yeah, I think it should have more of like a lively banjo type feel to it. And here it's sort of not quite as fun as I've heard it played elsewhere. The rhythm here is too loose, I think. It's too slack. and it rather continues this way to the end. So the album ends rather unexcitingly. Anyway, this is a welcome recital of some of the more popular piano works of their day. For my taste, the opening Lecuona works were weighted a little heavily on the romantic side, with a lot of rubato used. I guess Linda Malgieri wanted to contrast them with the danzas afro-cubanas, which are played with a stricter rhythmic profile and I thought were much more exciting. At times, Malgieri is playing so loud that you can hear the inside of the piano rattling. She's got impressive volume, but I need to emphasize that her playing follows Ernesto Lecuona's dynamic markings, which are heavily marked with quadruple fortes, so it's a faithful reproduction of the score. Malgieri handles the rather complicated rhythms well, particularly in the Danzas Afro-Cubanas by Ernesto Lecuona, which I feel are the most successful performances on the album. The Gottschalk works are played mostly in a romantic style, with heavy rubato, which in fact would have been the style, but to my ears it's too much. The pieces are slowed down by them and lose their momentum. Le Bananier was probably the most successful performance among the Gottschalk works, but I feel like Malgieri doesn't shape Gottschalk's melodies idiomatically enough.
This recording is an easy listen due to the rhythmic nature of the works. Lecuona's works have an appealing mix of European classical influences with this Cuban rhythm infusion. You can actually imagine percussion from the left-hand patterns in a lot of sections, what the instruments would be doing in the percussion section. Malgieri interprets them in an engaging way, so I enjoyed those pieces. Now, Gottschalk I've actually read more about than actually listened to, reading about the roots of American music and sort of the mixture of things that went into the creation of jazz in New Orleans. So this was interesting for me to listen to. There are a lot of influences blended into his compositions. So New Orleans, I think, must have filled his young mind with all different influences and different sounds. And these made me want to listen to some more of his works and see what other kinds of compositions he has, because he's a composer I haven't listened to enough of.
Yeah, I kind of feel like even for us growing up in the United States really was in the, sort of mid to late 20th century, really did something similar to us. It really was a big musical melting pot at the time. Yeah, genres weren't as sharply divided as they are today. Like everything has a label. But in those days, they had labels, this was jazz, this was rock, but they were all kind of interacting in a way. Classical music by then had sort of gone its weird, abstract post-war modernist way. So it was it was very different. But everything else was still popular music, including jazz. Jazz tunes got on the radio top 40 in the 60s.
Sometimes,
up until then. Sometimes, yeah. In the 50s more often.
Those Cuban rhythms got infused in the 40s right away in jazz too. And so now Latin jazz is its own genre, but back in the 40s it was incorporated right into bebop. So
right, yeah. And then that kind of played off into the Cuban dance bands and things like that. It was all very exciting, I think. All right, our contemporary composer tonight is Jean-Charles Gandrille, a new name to me. He's French, and he was born in 1982. Boy, I was in high school then. Anyway, these are his piano trios. Makes me happy to see that, though. Music's going to go on after I depart this world. I'm very happy to see that. Anyway, this recording features Jean-Charles Gandrille as the pianist as well as the composer, and he's partnered by David Galoustov, or David Galoustov, on the violin, and Grégoire Korniluk on the cello. And this is released by Paraty Records. It released 14 June 2024. A new label for us. It may be his own label. I'm not really sure. Anyway, from his website, Gandrille has said that his only goals are to move and make people dream. Not a bad life if you can do that. A good life is a youthful dream realized in the age of maturity. And here we are doing a podcast. We're doing the same thing.
About music. Yeah. What could be more fun?
Go. What could be more fun? I'm trying to think of something that'd be more fun and nothing comes up. Anyway, it's a happy coincidence that I programmed this in the same podcast as Gottschalk and Lecuona because Gandrille uses popular music approaches in these works. Let's listen to this. This is pretty interesting, actually. Tracks 1 to 2, the Nox Trio. Nox, Latin for night, I'm guessing. This is his trio number 1, Opus 31, composed in 2010, and the theme is, in fact, night. It's a two-movement work. The first movement is called Cantus, and the two movements are opposed. Cantus is a nostalgic dream born by the poetry of the night, the moon, the pallor, and the shadows, the hush and the sounds, a cricket chirping, and to lose oneself under the cover of the night. It starts with a solemn bass note and a descending figure that's then repeated. We hear chords, then an ostinato bass figure as the strings play a melody. I'm going to start a little into this for the sample from around the 50-second mark. The sound is highly melodic, and the melody itself is sweeping in a lightly romantic style. The repeating ostinato in the piano bass is reminiscent of minimalists like early Philip Glass or even of popular music. This could very well be a sung piece, given the melody's centrality. It's a generally calm movement. At 3 minutes and 40 seconds, the strings take over the ostinato pattern as the piano gets a chance with the melody. The individual notes have time to decay between attacks, so slow is the tempo and spacious the melody. The texture gets a bit thicker and more complex in the 4th and 5th minutes. The movement ends on a set of fortissimo chords. The second movement and final movement is called Contrapunctus. This is track 2. It's described as a rhythmic, frenzied trance of night dances, reflecting the immediacy and blazing light of our time. This starts right away after the first track ends with a more dancing, aggressive ostinato piano line with the cello playing a melody deep in the bass end. Let's hear how it starts. Okay, so I'm hearing new elements enter in the piano, and then they'll start repeating as well, and that approach reminds me of minimalism. Philip Glass, Terry Riley, John Adams even. Harmonically, this is pretty simple, moving in sudden chord changes, sort of like a rock tune would. The piece continues with this steady popular music rhythm throughout, with the two string instruments following along and occasionally adding brief and repetitive melodic content. The rhythm has a perpetual motion feel. In the 7th minute, the perpetual motion rhythm stops, and the material from the opening of the first movement is heard again. Tracks 3 through 5 has the appealing title, Pop Trio. This is trio number 2, opus 43, composed 2011 to 2013. And the title, Pop Trio, is given to this piece because of the beat, says Gandrille. The first movement, this is track 3, is marked énergique, and has simple motifs of beating tunes and harmonies of pop music. It starts with an appealing loping cello ostinato, whose tail end is a brief melodic figure. Let's sample that. I kind of cheated the violin there. Anyway, The piano comes in with chords, the violin plays in its high end and rather histrionically. The three voices are playing three different contrasting lines that nevertheless line up harmonically. Dynamics-wise, this is pretty aggressive, but the loping rhythm is appealing. I rather like the bit in the first minute when the piano momentarily drops out, leaving the violin and cello to play counter-melodies together. By the 2-minute and 48-second mark, the piano is playing thundering chords over string ostinato. This then changes to a repetitive piano line over a different string ostinato. At 3 minutes and 25 seconds, a reorchestrated look at the opening material is heard, and we're back to more familiar textures in the last 30 seconds of the movement. Track 4, the second movement, is marked calme, and this seeks simplicity but with even fewer means. The opening piano line is very sparse, with notes that are allowed to decay in the eternal space of the musical cosmos presented here. A very slow ostinato in the strings is introduced, and that happens a little later on, and I'm going to sample from that point, which is about 40 seconds into the track. There's a kind of sadness or regret to the overall feel of this movement. There's a slow, lamenting section followed by a piano ostinato that the strings play over. The movement concludes with the slower section we heard at the opening, the last notes decaying into the ends of the universe. Track 5, the third movement, is marked intense or intense. It's similar to movement 1 in its very simple motifs of beating tunes and harmonies of pop music. This movement is brief at 2 minutes and has a jaunty rhythm provided by the strings, with the piano playing majestic, optimistic chords. The whole thing engages in a slow crescendo. This is probably the most immediately appealing and uplifting movement on the album. So let's give a sample to this. And we go on to the end of that track and the end of this trio. Tracks 6 through 8 are the trio number 3, opus 57, which is titled Triads. This was composed in 2016 to 2017, and it's named after the chords that are used so often in this work and in all works. It's kind of funny in a way, because you could really call any song triads, really, couldn't you?
Yeah, unless it were power chords, but...
Right. Track 6 is the first movement, labeled Triads, and it starts with a violin ostinato playing double-stopped chords. The cello has the theme over majestic piano chords. Gandrille relies on the ostinato a lot. There's something John Adams-like about this particular movement, though it's a different process than Adams would use. Material is passed around the trio, with everyone getting a chance at thematic material. The movement has an aggressive energy well captured by the performers. The ostinato textures are featured throughout and change to new sections frequently. Track 7 is the second movement, which kind of is surprisingly titled Auschwitz Impressions. You really wouldn't think something this heavy was coming, but this was inspired by Gandrille's visit to Auschwitz concentration camp in the winter of 2016, when returning home from a wedding in Poland. Gandrille here wants to commemorate the memory of the people who died there by bringing incandescent accents of immense pain to the highest intensity. I'm going to sample the opening of this before I talk about it. Let's listen. And again, we get a mournful melody, but a rather simple melody again. The heavy mezzoforte treading chord starts the piece, and the strings play the somber melody. The piano then plays it prettily with a soft touch and beautiful tone. The somber melody is played again. At around the 2-minute and 30-second mark, the violin and cello play a new theme, sounding more emotional. The movement never reaches histrionic levels, but when this section is over, the violin drops an octave and plays more quietly against the cello, who's playing an ostinato phrase as the piano hammers on chords in quarter notes. There's a big dramatic build-up at the end that reaches a peak in the 7th minute and quickly winds down to an eventual silent pause. The piano then plays an arpeggiated chord in the bass and a melody in the watery middle range. Track 8, the third movement, is just marked Finale. An ostinato, much like the one in the opening movement, only quicker, begins this movement. Let's hear this one. Some tricky rhythms in there, and the swirling strings constantly changing their approach. The rhythm is almost machine-like and is reminiscent in repetition and speed to the more rapid sections of Philip Glass's Koyaanisqatsi score, if anybody's heard that score or seen that movie. It's a movement of rapid changing sections with repeated sections within them. Lots of moving parts that sometimes interlock and sometimes stay independent rhythmically of each other. The movement ends with a cheeky run to the tonic. Tracks 9 through 10 are the fourth and final trio on the album, Opus 85, titled An Angel... This was composed in 2021 to 2022, so during the COVID years. And I don't know if I mentioned this, Opus 85. This was written specifically for this recording and the style of violinist David Galoustov and cellist Grégoire Korniluk. It's a 2-movement work. Track 9 is the first movement, An Angel Foretold... The title and first melodic theme are taken from a chapter of Gandrille's Christmas Oratorio, Opus 78. A verse in the oratorio from the 16th century poem by Jean de la Sapède that reads, "An angel had predicted the time of his coming," becomes a simple musical phrase on the violin here. So this starts with a luminous arpeggiated piano pattern and a sweet-sounding violin with a heavenly melody. Let's sample that. The cello answers when the violin finishes. It's pretty and very straightforward harmonically and melodically, instantly appealing. The piano part relies heavily on ostinato patterns, again reminding me of musical minimalism, and keeps busy with them throughout the movement. The piano gets a chance at a melody, while the violin and cello take over ostinato duties in the 2nd minute. At 3 minutes, the piano starts the opening arpeggiated pattern again, this time with the cello coming in first. This leads to a section where the strings gradually do a diminuendo to silence as the piano pattern ends, and a dotted chord pattern starts up with the violin and cello playing quiet lines with harmonics. At the 6-minute mark, a new piano pattern starts, melodic with arpeggiated chords. The dotted chord pattern with string harmonics comes back, this time higher in the piano's range. After this, the opening arpeggiated pattern and string melodies return in the 8th minute. This builds to a climax, ending on an emphatic bass note in the piano. There's a coda that starts just before the 11th minute, featuring gentle piano chords, bringing the movement to an end. And the second and final movement, track 10, is labeled Angel Dance. This is rhythmically active and begins like a minimalist piece with ostinati that are briefly interrupted, then resume with a lively piano ostinato. The ostinato line is handed around. It winds up in the cello at one point for an extended period. There's a pretty harp-like arpeggiated accompaniment in the third minute as the cello plays lyrically. The movement changes sections often and ends with an aggressive rhythmic approach to the final chord, speeding up and crescendoing to the end. This album certainly is an easy listen and may be an ideal entry point for listeners who want to hear contemporary composed music without having their ears lacerated by the more harsh offerings out there. Though there are a lot of contemporary music that falls on the ear appealingly, if with more complexity. The samples I played actually give a good idea of what the entire movement sounds like, at least in character. The character of the movement doesn't change, although the patterns do. Interest is in the interaction of rhythms and placing of sections one after the other. I'd say the works on this album primarily aim to entertain or to be appealing. There isn't much harmonic activity, and chords seem to change in a block-like way, as in a rock or pop song, from the last 70 years or so. Textures are often pretty, and some of the ostinato material gets under your skin. Complexity comes in the rhythmic patterns, the repeating patterns, and how they repeat. Sonically speaking, I have to say, this doesn't sound like it was written by a French composer. I often associate French composers with sonority, with timbre, with really intriguing combinations of instruments. It makes me curious to hear some of Gandrille's orchestral music. What would that sound like? The performances are excellent and directly convey the spirit of the music. I'd say this is music for fans of musical minimalism and of appealing melodies, especially in the fourth trio, which I would recommend you sample first.
In general, this music is a bit too rhythmic and repetitive for my own taste, but I can see the appeal, and I think it would be a good crossover into classical music, especially for people who are used to that rhythmic nature of pop music. This would be an easy transition into the sounds of instruments and the style of composition, while having a lot of rhythmic familiarity to hold on to. Of the program, what I enjoyed the most was the Auschwitz impressions. I found that quite moving, and the phrasing and the melody there was very intriguing to me. And I liked both movements of the An Angel as well.
It was pretty. Yeah,
the prettiness of it. And the rhythms in there were engaging as well. But some of the earlier part of the album, I was kind of rhythmed out a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of like the pop trio a bit. I thought that was kind of appealing.
You like that? Yeah, it was interesting, something different, a new approach to a contemporary composition. As you say, the harmonies are kind of easy on the ear. There are some interesting chordal inversions and working of the harmonies within the framework that I found engaging too. So something that's pretty easy to get into rhythmically that pulls in your attention. And as you say, the variations and changing of the patterns are mainly what you're listening for as you go through the movements. Okay, over on the jazz side, it's trumpet time, Mike.
Oh, fantastic.
3 trumpet releases in this program, and we're going to have a little bit of pop infusion in here as well, but not necessarily what our English speakers who listen to the podcast may be familiar with. Actually, as a matter of fact, I'm going to need you to stay fully engaged in the first album, Mike.
Okay.
As some listeners may know, Mike himself is a paisan who's fluent in Italian, and you're going to have to help me with the correct pronunciation of the song titles here.
Yeah, I got to tell you, some of these are in dialect, so I'll see what I can do.
All right, let's start out with the title.
The title of the album is Il cielo è pieno di stelle, which means the sky is full of stars. Omaggio a Pino Daniele.
Right, Pino Daniele. So me not knowing much about Italian pop music, this was an education for me, and I used it as an opportunity to learn. And this is on Warner Music, came out June 21st. We had to listen to this because it features one of our favorite trumpet players, Fabrizio Bosso.
Right.
We've heard before on the podcast several times. And here he's in a duo format with the pianist Julian Oliver Mazzariello.
Yeah. Mazzariello, yeah.
This is featuring the music of Pino Daniele, who was an Italian singer, songwriter, and musician from Naples. He lived from 1955 to 2015, and his music has a lot of influences in different genres: pop, blues, jazz, Italian, and Middle Eastern music, all mixed into his kind of recipe for pop music. And I read that he's kind of credited for a revival of Neapolitan-type songs in the 1980s as well.
Right. He's like extremely well known among Italians. And I don't mean
Right.
Italian Americans. I mean people who were born and grew up in Italy.
Right. Have you come across his music in your travels in Italy?
Well, I did, but I didn't know it was him naturally because I
Right.
wasn't really aware of this. I went to a wedding in Italy once. And one of the things that is remarkable is that they know all the songs that we know, but they have this other kind of Italian sort of repertoire as well. And I knew
Right.
none of those songs. You know?
Okay.
So they're like us, except they have more. And I was kind
Right.
of jealous, really.
Well, it's kind of interesting, that each country has its own pop music scene that never crosses over if it's not in English or another language, so it's a whole world of Italian pop music that someone like me doesn't know about. Anyway, we're going to get to sample that through a jazz interpretation of it here. Our two musicians, on trumpet, Fabrizio Bosso graduated from the Giuseppe Verdi Conservatory in Turin. He's played with the top Italian and European jazz musicians, recorded for Blue Note. He's played with big names, Dino Piana, Marco Tamborini, Didi Bridgewater, Diane Reeves, Stefano Di Battista, Enrico Rava, and featured as a soloist with Maria Schneider. I consider him one of the top trumpet players in the world. On piano, a new name for me, kind of. I've heard him with Bosso before. Julian Oliver Mazzariello was born in Hatfield, England, to an English mother and an Italian father. He's played on more than 30 recordings, including also with Stefano Di Battista and previously with Bosso. They have another duo recording I recommend you check out from 2014. It's called Tandem. So The Sky is Full of Stars, the English translation, is the tribute of Fabrizio Bosso and Mazzariello to the music of Pino Daniele. This is a translated quote from Bosso. The music and poetics of Pino Daniele have influenced generations of musicians, including me. In his melodies, there is never a misplaced note, and there is not only blues, rock, or funk, but also a lot of jazz. We have all sung Pino Daniele in our lives.
Yes, they have. I can tell you, because if they hear these melodies, they immediately start singing these words, and I don't know these songs. So
I took an opportunity to go and check out the original tunes so I could understand what they were doing in their interpretations of them. So I'll just give a little impression of those things too.
Okay.
All right, track one.
Yeso pazzo, which means I'm crazy.
Yeah. From what I can tell, this is from his 1979 self-titled album. The original has a plodding bass line, sounds like a tuba, maybe, if I'm not mistaken, and an acoustic guitar that's appealing. Here, Mazzariello has bluesy and bouncy piano going on, and Bosso has the plunger mute in action.
Yeah.
He's one of the players who's an expert of the plunger mute, and I'm glad that after a long time of not hearing it in trumpet, it's kind of coming back in vogue. We're going to hear it on another album later tonight.
Right.
This is a lot of fun, so let's get a long sample of the beginning to see what this music is about. had to let it go until those growls came.
Yeah. He's got so much, like, it's not just the technique either. It's just like the sense of, what to play when and things like this. He's really got it all, Fabrizio Bosso. He's a great player.
Now, I know you want to hear some more of that plunger. At least I do. So let's check out Bosso's improvised solo on this tune. He's got a great sense of humor in his playing always, along with really dangerous licks and doing some really adventurous harmonic things there too.
Right.
Mazzariello keeps the bouncy left-hand going line from there with a choppy solo of his own, fun lines and some cool tremolos. They bring it down softer for another time through the melody, but keep it playful right to the end. All right, track 2.
Which is Allora sì, which means something like, well, yeah.
Okay. This is from a 1993 album, Che Dio ti benedica. The original song has some very nice acoustic guitar work and flowing vocals with some catchy chord changes. Mazzariello has a smoothness to the piano chords, and Bosso is lyrical on the flowing melody. Let's check out the intro and the first section of the melody. To a new section there. Mazzariello gets a nice solo section with varied dynamics and more rhythmic sections before Bosso has a soaring solo that connects back to the melody. Already and continually, as I'm checking out these original tunes too, I'm really struck by Daniele's variety in his music.
Right.
You would never even know it's the same guy creating all these different types of songs throughout his career, which deserves a lot of respect because in the pop world, artists tend to get kind of pigeonholed into a style and their fans get upset when they try something new. But he seems to have been able to reinvent himself through lots of different kinds of music.
I want to mention, listening to this in the trumpet version, this sounds a lot like an Italian pop song. This is basically what they sound like.
Interesting.
They're often kind of romantic like this.
All right, the next title I can handle by myself, Quando? When? And this is from 1992's Sotto o Sole. The original is poppy and rhythmic with a pleading vocal line. Here they give it a rubato, dreamy ballad treatment. The beginning has a little explosive sound effect. Is that from the piano pedal recorded like really up close? I'm not sure. And the trumpet is reverby and Bosso squeezes way up high. Let's check it out. Mazzariello has some lovely delicate piano on this tune, so let's hear a little bit of his playing later on. Bosso's back from there to the end, taking it way up high again for the final note. Now track 4 is actually a Chick Corea composition, Sicily. This is from his 1978 album Friends, but Daniele added lyrics and his own vocals to this work on his 1993 recording mentioned before, C'è Dio ti benedica. Corea's original version has a driving samba beat, but Daniele gave it a slow groove, and here Mazzariello has a really great rhythmic left-hand rhythm going on and a lot of motion there, and Bosso is agile on the melody lines. Let's hear the beginning of it. It's got a real Chick Corea style to it in the melody line there. What's really neat on this tune is the animated solo sections they trade off here. So let's jump back in and hear a little bit of that as well. Keeping that left-hand rhythm going underneath those lines is really something there. They keep on trading like that, and it really ends with a blast. Don't miss the end of the tune. Track 5.
Okay, so this one is Mal di te, which is, I guess, bad of you. And then there's another tune, Napule è, which is Naples is.
Right, so it's kind of a medley or joining of two tunes. So the first part is from the same album mentioned before, C'è Dio ti benedica, and Napole is from Terra Mia from 1977. Now the original Mal di te has a synthy opening with seagull sounds and floating vocal lines. The dreamy quality is captured here in Mazzariello's light rhythmic arpeggios, and Bosso comes in on the ballad Napole later on, and it's a lovely gentle playing on this tune. I'll leave you to check it out. It's hard to capture in a sample. Track 6.
You have Sotto o Sole, which is Under the Sun.
Boy, I wish we could be under the sun, Mike. The third week in a row it's raining here.
Yeah, we're under the clouds.
This is from 1980's Nero a Metà. Now, the original tune here I checked out has a rhythmic start with vocalizing, and then it gets into a samba-like groove. They keep that playful idea here with some rhythmic piano chords with seconds in them, the interval I mean, and trumpet improvisations into the melody. Let's hear this tune get going. And on this tune, the two trade off sections of improvisations, so let's hear some of their playful exchanges. That is really happy and fun stuff under the sun there. They get back to the melody soon and build up tension to the end with some trilly trumpet and a final cute figure.
By the way, I looked up the lyrics to Mal di te because I was wondering what it means. And he's saying, O mal di te, which you'd say like, O mal di testa, for I have a headache. So what it means is, I have you sickness. You know, I miss you or something that. You know, I have a you ache. It's kind of cute.
All right, track 7 is Anima. I guess that means soul.
Yep, that's what it means.
This is from the 1995 album Non calpestare I fiori nel deserto.
Wow. He's got some poetic titles for his albums.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
The original tune starts out melancholy and minor, but works into an R&B groove. It's got nice chord changes and is a good lyrical vehicle for Bosso's trumpet. Here it gets motion, but not a groove. I'll let you check out the melody, but let's hear some of Mazzariello's tasty piano into some trumpet improvisations a little bit into the tune. They get back to the melody soon there with some final soaring trumpet from Bosso. Track 8.
A me piace o blues. As for me, I like the blues.
This is from 1980's Nero a Metà album. The original has funky electric piano and fat bass with a gutsy vocal. Here, it's a different kind of funky with some fun rumbly piano from Mazzariello that works into fast walking bass lines under Bosso's puckish melody lines. Let's check it out. Now let's take a listen to the crazy piano solo on this one into Bosso's trumpet solo. Hate to stop it there, but they'll take it through the melody again to what can only be called a frenzied ending. Track 9.
We have Anna Verrà, which means Anna will come.
And this is from the 1989 recording Mascalzone Latino. The original has a synthy beginning with acoustic guitar and a passionate vocal. Here it's presented as a pretty and lyrical melody for Bosso's trumpet. Let's check it out. Mazzariello's solo piano section flows, and Bosso's solo soars high but gently and with great control, and he holds a super long note before the final phrase. And the recording ends up with
Se mi vuoi, if you want me.
This is from the 1995 album Non calpestare I fiori nel deserto. And I think that was also a duet with the singer Irene Grande. This here is a short live recording included at the end of the album. Apparently, from what I've seen, they have a touring schedule as a duo playing this music. And I guess that all Italians know the words to this song
They do,
because the
I'm
crowd
sure.
starts singing it right away, leaving Bosso mainly to back up the crowd and then add a high final phrase, resulting in a lot of applause. It's just over 2 minutes to end up the recording. It's always a treat to hear Fabrizio Bosso's trumpet. Last time it was on the music of Stevie Wonder that everyone is familiar with, and here it's on Italian singer-songwriters Pino Daniele's compositions.
That all Italians are familiar
That
with.
all Italians are familiar with. Mazzariello's piano playing is skillful and exciting. Together they cover expressions from tenderness to high excitement, and the overall impression is that they are having a lot of fun making their own unique expressions on music that is dear to them. Even if you're not Italian or don't know Daniele's music, you'll have an easy time enjoying this recording.
Yeah, I agree. Pino Daniele was known to me mostly as a pop singer, but he delved into blues and jazz or jazzy forms as well, and even other forms.
Yeah.
So this album comes across as an album with a lot of Fabrizio Bosso's interpretations of pop songs, and he's fantastic with the melodies, as you would imagine, with that big, strong tone of his. One thing that struck me about this duo is the muscle and energy they're able to put into the music without playing particularly fast or loud. You can hear this on the opening track, Io So Pazzo, and on the sixth, Sotto o Sole. There are some gentle, romantic melodies on the album too, more in a pop vein, with warm harmonies and affectionate phrasing. Bosso's playing is technically astonishing throughout, as it is on every album. More so on this album than others I've heard, I think. He seems to step out more here. Pino Daniele's music is part of the Italian cultural mainstream, and if you don't know it, this is a good way to familiarize yourself with his compositions before going to the original recordings themselves. If that doesn't interest you, no worries, this is an album worth hearing for its great playing, and it's also an album I wouldn't mind having on CD, but Amazon.com in the US wants $26.99 for it. That's like $80 in Japan. You can't afford it.
Yeah, let's hope it shows up somewhere domestically here for a little less money.
Yeah, if it shows up domestically directly from Italy, it might be cheaper, but it's on Warner. It should be cheap because they're a big company. I don't know.
Yeah, this would definitely be one to have in the collection.
Yeah.
All right, the next recording in this week's Trumpet Time is by trumpeter Anthony Stanco. Stanco's Time on OA2, Origin Arts 2 record label. It came out June 21st. Anthony Stanco is from Southeast Michigan, and he was a student of Marcus Belgrave and Rodney Whitaker. He studied at the Manhattan School of Music and then returned to Michigan State University to complete his education. He won first place in the International Trumpet Guild's 2013 Jazz Improvisation Competition. As leader of the Crucial Elements group, he was featured in the U.S. State Department's American Music Abroad program, and now he's an assistant professor at Michigan State University. You can also check out his previous release as a leader titled You Know the Feeling from 2020. Now, we've heard a lot of these great Michigan-based players before on the podcast, including Stanco on Randy Napoleon's recording of Greg Hill's music that we really liked, The Door is Open. That was back in episode 155, called Golden Hours. So on this recording, Anthony Stanco on trumpet, Walter Blanding on tenor sax on 3 tracks, Randy Napoleon on guitar, Xavier Davis, fine piano player that we always like to hear, Rodney Whitaker on bass, and the great Joe Farnsworth on drums.
Yeah, this is an all-star lineup for us. This is really good.
Unless otherwise mentioned, these are all Stanco's original compositions, recorded, mixed, and mastered by Corey DeRuscia at Troubadour Recording Studios, Lansing, Michigan. It was recorded on August 3rd and 4th, 2023. The recording gets underway with the track called Showtime, and it's a great opener with a 16-measure intro featuring Davis's piano improvisations and a light clicky beat from Farnsworth. Stanco and Napoleon take the melody in unison. There's an opening 16-measure section, and then the main melody, where the rhythm has more of a driving swing, has a 16-measure section and a 20-measure section. Let's check it out from where the trumpet and guitar come in a little bit into the tune. And Stanco's off on an improvised solo from there. I wish we could just keep letting it play. We're going to break up the samples a little bit. Let's jump back in to hear some more of it. And Napoleon follows on guitar, and then Davis on piano. They play the main melody again, then the opening section that gets a little fun ending to wrap it up. Track 2, Stanco's Time, the title track. The intro has some playful exchanges between the bass and piano and drums. The melody is an easy swinging boppy tune taken again by Stanco and Napoleon together. It's a 16-measure melody around twice. Let's check it out. Stanco solos first with a good sense of relaxed swing, soaring up high on the way. Let's check out Napoleon's guitar solo on this tune. Warm tone and nice phrasing. Davis follows from there on piano, and Whitaker gets a bass solo on this tune that really sings out with melodic ideas. Stanco and Napoleon are back with new melodic phrases that trade fours with Farnsworth before they get back to one more time through the melody with some final phrase repeats to an ending. Track 3 is Tad Dameron's Hot House. Jazz fans will know this tune, first recorded by Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie in 1945. There's a fun intro with bass and drums stopping up under Davis's piano, trumpet and guitar in unison again on the boppy melody. They use the stop time idea under Stanco's solo for some extra fun, and Napoleon has a guitar solo as well. On this one, I want to sample Joe Farnsworth's awesome drum solo. to the melody from there to close it out. Track 4, also a Tad Dameron tune, If You Could See Me Now, first recorded by Sarah Vaughan in 1946. When I was young, I remember hearing Billy Eckstein's version from the early 1950s that left an impression on me. We get to check out Stanco's lyrical side on this great melody. He starts it out with a little intro only backed by Davis's piano. Subtle articulations and pitch play in his phrasing are really fine here. Let's hear it get going. To fade it on the repeat of the A section. I've always liked the B section of this tune, the way that it lifts and changes the character of the tune. Stanco's solo here has great melodic ideas and more interesting articulation, and Davis gets some tasty piano time with chiming chords around ideas picked out from the melody. And when Stanco comes back on the B section, they push it up with a driving swing tempo before pulling it back into ballad gear. Listen closely for the little soft tremolos from Napoleon underneath. And Stanco finishes it off with a cadenza that has a lot of flair. So let's check out the end of this tune. All right, track 5, back to Stanco's original compositions, Josie Rosie. This is a fun bluesy tune in a 32-measure AABA form. Stanco has the harmon mute in for the melody, playing along with Napoleon. The B section has some band vocals on the song title, along with some giggles, I assume, from Stanco's daughter, Josie. I can't get the whole melody in a sample, so let's join in on the B section and check it out. Gets the first solo with nice bluesy licks, and Stanco gets a solo with the mute. Let's check out some of Whitaker and Farnsworth's solo exchanges on this one. to get back to the melody, interestingly, the A sections are different from in the beginning of the tune with lower, darker phrases, and then the original B and A sections wrap it up. Track 6, Miles Davis's Dig. Miles Davis recorded this in 1951 with Sonny Rollins. It's a contrafact, or a new melody composed over the chords of Sweet Georgia Brown. Here, it's a fun duet for Stanco and Farnsworth with speedy lines from Stanco. Let's hear a bit of this fun. Well, that's about half of it there. It's short at just over 2 minutes. Now back to the time idea with another Stanco original, Deep Time, for track 7. This is a shuffling tune, kind of Art Blakey style, and Farnsworth brings it in with a roll into the 4-measure intro. The melody has twists from the minor mood, with Napoleon sometimes in unison and sometimes with neat counterlines. It's in an A-B-A-C kind of form. Let's hear it get going. That final unique section of the melody there. Napoleon solos first, then Stanco, and let's check out Davis's piano solo on this tune. Really cool ideas in that solo, and Whitaker has a bass solo from there. Then Stanco and Farnsworth have some fun trading fours before they take it through the melody again, and it has a neat extended ending with some final drums from Farnsworth. Track 8, another Stanco original, worth the time. More fun for Farnsworth on this one. Walter Blanding joins in on sax too, and after a drum intro, the melody is taken together by cup-muted trumpet, sax, and guitar with drum breaks. It's a 16-measure idea around twice with different endings. Let's hear that get going into Stanco's trumpet solo. Whitaker's really walking it home with those bass lines there. Blanding gets a husky toned sax solo next, so let's check out some of his playing. Whitaker gets a walking bass solo on this tune with some fills from Farnsworth, who then gets a brushed drum solo with a lot of cool textures before they get back to the melody and a cute ending. Track 9, Duke Ellington's Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me. This is adapted from the Concerto for Cootie, which goes back to 1940. Woody Herman also recorded a version of this tune, and Cootie Williams was an expert of the plunger mute, and that's what Stanco treats us with here. Yeah, more plunger. Nicely traded phrases with Whitaker's bass there. Well, we got treated tonight from both Fabrizio Bosso and Stanco's plunger techniques. And from here in the tune, they get into the famous melody at about 1.5 minutes, and the rest of the band comes in on the B section. Stanco gets a plunged solo, and Blanding has a sax solo too, quoting some Charlie Parker on the way. Whitaker follows, and Blanding is back on the B section of the melody, with Stanco joining in to take it to the end with some final Cootieisms on the plunger. Track 10, Stanco original, back to the time theme. This is minor time. As indicated by the title, it's a minor tune. The structure is AABA, but 16-measure B section here in contrast to the 8-measure A sections. On the A parts, Napoleon is doubling the trumpet in the lower register, and Stanco is up first for a solo. On the solo sections, they switch it up to 12-bar blues for a couple rounds and then bring back the bridge section for a little Latin-y contrast. Let's hear it get going. this is a really good solo with licks reminiscent of Freddie Hubbard and Woody Shaw. So let's hear some more of it before we move on. Davis and Napoleon have engaging solos on this one too, before a final melody section. Track 11, Thelonious Monk's Ask Me Now, and this is a duet for Stanco and Napoleon, who does a nice job with Monk's chord voicings translated to guitar. It's hard to capture the essence in a sample on this one, so I'll give you just a taste with Stanco's ending cadenza. By the way, that tune is from Monk's Genius of Modern Music Volume 2, all the way back in 1952. And the recording's going to end up with another classic bebop tune, Charlie Parker's Now's the Time. It's a nice wrap-up to all the time tune ideas on this recording with a 12-bar blues. Davis and Whitaker trade phrases on the intro, and jazz fans all know the melody, so I won't sample that. Let's jump to Stanco's solo, where he starts right off exploring some interesting harmonic possibilities. Playful, and he works it up to a double-time conclusion line. Blanding has a tenor sax solo, and Davis's piano solo has some playful harmonic exploration too, and Farnsworth gets the last solo before a couple final rounds of the melody. And that's the recording. Stanco's time is a good time indeed. The tunes and playing styles take us from Ellington-era plunger fun, boppy Charlie Parker and Monk, and Tad Dameron to more modern harmonic concepts with shades of Woody Shaw. His original tunes slot right in between these jazz classics and have a variety of structures, rhythmic feels, and surprises in the arrangements. Stanco shares the melodies often with Napoleon's guitar, and we get a couple pared down duet tunes and some sax added in with Blanding joining in on 3 tunes. Stanco's technique and flair stand out, as well as his creative solo ideas and mature phrasing. Great solos from Napoleon, Davis, and Whitaker too, and of course fabulous drumming throughout and in solos from Joe Farnsworth. It's a recording that's as fresh as it is original, which isn't easy to do.
Yeah, you pretty much said everything I said here too. I guess I'll repeat some of it. Anthony Stanco, he's a really exciting player. He's got this big, bright, positive tone and a lot of presence when he plays. And this is a traditionally swinging album, and it swings hard in some parts, and that really made it appealing. It's all enjoyable, particularly because of Stanco, though everyone, like you said, really shines on this, and especially our favorite Joe Farnsworth. I really like his drumming too. Yeah. Great tone from Randy Napoleon on guitar. I always enjoy Rodney Whitaker's bass playing. Just a great recording too. It sounds clear, fantastic. Yeah, I may have to pick this one up too. And I see my bank account dwindling as the weeks go on. Anyway.
All right, and our third recording is also on the Origin labels. It's on the main Origin label. Jared Hall's Influences. This also came out June 21st. Jared Hall is from Spokane, Washington, and now he's based in Seattle. He studied at Whitworth University, the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music, and the University of Miami's Frost School of Music, where he got a doctorate of musical arts degree in 2015. His trumpet teachers included Terrence Blanchard and Brian Lynch. He was the winner of the 2013 National Trumpet Competition Jazz Division, and he's performed and recorded with names like Paquito de Rivera, Bob Hurst, John DeVersa, Arturo Sandoval, and Maria Schneider, Vincent Herring too. You can check out his previous recordings as a leader, Hallways, that was on Holistic Music Works 2017, and his previous Origin release from 2021, Scene on the Scene. On this recording, Jared Hall on trumpet and all compositions except track 8, Tal Cohen on piano, a Miami-based player, Michael Glynn on bass, and John Bishop on drums, the founder of Origin Records himself. This was produced by Jared Hall, recorded February of 2022 by Rob Davidson at Avast Recording Company, Seattle, Washington, mixed by Dave Darlington at Bass Hit Studio in New York, and Brian Lynch at Holistic Music Works Studio in Miami, mastered by Dave Darlington at Bass Hit Studios in New York. The Origin notes say, with his second Origin release, Jared Hall directs his attention to the influences that first kindled and then nourished and sustained his life path as a trumpeter-composer. Thoughts of Woody Shaw, Tom Harrell, Wallace Roney, and others provided the inspiration for the 8 original compositions. So let's jump into it with the first track, Song for Shaw, Woody Shaw that is. It's a minor 12-bar blues, and if you know Woody Shaw's advanced harmonic concept and unique interval ideas, you'll recognize the influence in the melody and into Hall's solo ideas. Let's hear this recording get going. Interesting ideas and a fine solo to start the recording out. Cohen has an energetic and reaching solo on piano too, and John Bishop has hard-hitting accents throughout. Glynn has a bass solo with interesting melodic and rhythmic ideas, and Hall and Cohen come back to trade choruses with Bishop. So let's hear some of that interaction later in the tune. for some more rounds before getting back to the melody and a final scream from Hall. Track 2, Dear Roy, and that would be a ballad for Roy Hargrove, who I got to meet when we were both still in high school at the first Downbeat Magazine Music Fest USA.
Wow, how about that?
Unfortunately, Roy Hargrove left us too soon. Anyway, back to this tune. It has a moody and touching 16-measure melody and shows off Hall's lyrical side. Let's hear it get going. Hall's improvised solo really builds up to a climax on this with nice phrasing, and Cohen's piano solo is delicate and rippling with a soft touch on repeated notes. Let's hear a little bit of his playing. Hall returns from there for a final exposition of the melody. Track 3, Professor B.L. That's for Brian Lynch, one of the top trumpeters out there and a master of Latin music too. A cool bass ostinato from Glynn gets the 12-measure introduction going. The melody's a repeating 20-measure construction with shifting modal harmonies and a section with the rhythm section stopping up under the trumpet line. Let's hear this one get started. Let's come back in for some of Hall's trumpet solo on this tune. nice arc to that solo. And Cohen has some rapid-fire rhythmic licks there, getting his solo started on this one, and he keeps pushing the excitement with runs and explosive chords until Hall returns for a final time through the melody and a high-note ending. Track 4 is One for Wallace. That's Wallace Roney, a Miles Davis protege who had his own trumpet voice too. Sadly, he passed away too young at the age of 59 in 2020 from COVID complications. Back in episode 109, Spirit and Swing, we checked out his son, Wallace Roney Jr.'s recording Gangway, and we found that he's following in his father's trumpet footsteps and adding his own new ideas. This has kind of a dreamy atmosphere with a loping bass line on the 8-measure intro. The melody has interesting intervals in the line and seems to change up with measures of 2/4, making the phrasing kind of interesting. Let's have a listen. Hall solo is an interesting navigation through the harmonies on this one with well-connected phrases, syncing rhythmically with the rhythm section at the end. Let's check out Glyn's bass solo on this tune. Hall is back for just one line, and then Bishop gets to do some drum work before Hall returns with the melody, and this sounds like a really challenging tune to play. Track 5, Let the Children Dance. A charming rhythmic one. Hall starts it out with a rhythmic figure that the bass picks up on. The melody has happy riffs first from Hall and then Cohen. Let's hear it. Hall's solo on this one has some fine agility and phrasing of melodic ideas, so let's pop back in and hear a little bit of that. Cohen's solo percolates with rhythmic notes and chiming chords, and Bishop gets a drum solo too before some final happy melody phrases from Hall. Track 6, Beyond the Thorns. This tune has a mysterious mood, but a catchy melody. After an 8-measure intro, Hall is in on the harmon-muted melody. It's interesting that the first phrase is 7 measures, and then the next is 8, with a break during which the mute comes out for a final open section of the melody. Let's check it out. Hall continues on improvising, working up high and ending with a trill. Cohen's solo really mixes in a lot of different ideas, also working up high, and Hall is back for another time through the melody without the mute to end the tune. Track 7, Harrell, for trumpeter and also great composer Tom Harrell. This tune has a unique rhythmic feel and gets started out with a bass ostinato and drum groove. The melody is really Harrell-esque with its weaving lines. It's in an A-B-A form, and check out the neat syncopation on the B section. Hall's off improvising from there, building harmonic tension and leaving some phrases hanging in suspense. Let's check out Cohen's exciting piano solo on this one with racing lines and percussive chords. Those chords there back into Hall's return with the melody. Track 8 is a tune by Gigi Greiss, the saxophonist, from the Gigi Greiss Clifford Brown Sextet recording in 1953. It's called Minority. Hall starts this out with a solo rubato improvisation with tastes of the melody before snapping it into tempo for the melody with the entrance of the others. Let's hear this get going. It's a classic melody. Cohen solos first with a lot of energy, and Hall builds a good solo over just bass and drums at the start, giving him some extra harmonic freedom. I really like the climax here with harmonic tensions and high repeated figures and notes. It's a highlight of the recording, so let's listen to that. To the melody from there. And the recording ends up with Dream Steps. This is another really charming tune. The steps are the intriguing harmonic steps that you'll hear moving along. The bass starts the 10-measure intro with a break into the 32-measure melody that switches up between Latin feels and swing. Let's check this one out. Hall continues on for an improvised solo with some exciting double-time licks. Glenn gets a featured bass solo on this tune as well, with Hall coming in for some backing lines before getting back to the melody to finish up the recording. It's a fine collection of original compositions that are challenging but captivating with catchy melodies and different structures and grooves, all giving nods to great modern trumpeters who influenced Hall's trumpet style. Hall's trumpet chops are strong, with a well-developed modern harmonic sense and really well-structured solos. I enjoyed his playing a lot. Cohen's solos are really exciting, with a lot of surprises at every turn, and Glenn has fine bass solos too, and drives it all along, locking in with Bishop's hard-hitting drums that often catch your ear throughout the program. A recording not to be missed by fans of modern jazz trumpet.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength tonight. I actually mentioned the hard-hitting drums as well. In my thing. Yeah, that was great. That really kind of excited me about it too. I also like the piano solos, and I like the whole concept of just dedications, like in each tune. It was really a nice kind of idea. So you had a lot of variety, and then in these different styles. And I thought that Hall was a full-tone player. He's really hot on the faster tempo tracks. It was just a real pleasure to listen to throughout. So it was a little bit of a lesson for me. I mean, I know these guys, but I don't really know the dedicatees style. So it was kind of cool to hear this and his interpretation of them.
Yeah, he did a really good job, especially, right from the beginning with the Shaw concept.
Yeah, I really picked up on that whole groove on that too. Right. It was really great.
And I really liked the weaving kind of line that Tom Harrell would put into one of his songs. His songs are usually like a kind of puzzle that he's going to have to solve through his improvisations. And they're really challenging. And his kind of unique way of leading his lines, that was really spot on. I would have thought of Tom Harrell right away, even if I hadn't known that. So, yeah, nice dedication. I was pulled into these original compositions. They have like little melodic nuggets and interesting harmonies. Yeah, really good stuff. Yeah,
I might want this one too. Boy, feeling broke already.
Too many records to buy.
Too many records.
Yeah, well, thanks mainly Origin there for those two great trumpet recordings. I really like that they put out great music on the Origin label, and also the page gives you a lot of information, pretty much everything you need to know for their recordings. So great job, Origin. And also, it was great to hear Fabrizio Bosso again. We'll always check out his recordings when they come out.
I think so, yeah.
All right, well, that's going to wrap up episode 171. Thanks, as always, to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. And don't forget to check out The Same Difference, Two Jazz Fans, One Jazz Standard podcast. Their audio promo will be coming up when we sign off here. And what do we have on the menu for episode 172, Mike?
Well, I'm still mining records that came out in May, and next week's going to be July, so I don't know what's going on here, but there are a lot of good things, yeah? The first one is like Baroque music by Giuseppe Clemente dall'Abaco. Now, he's a different composer than Evaristo Felice dall'Abaco, of whom there are quite a few recordings out now, so I'm curious to hear that. And that's on our pals at the Da Vinci Classics label, so we get to hear some more of that. There's a symphony by Lucas Foss, who is a German-born American composer. He became really famous as an American composer. So I had to get an American in there for Independence Day, even though we're going to be a bit late. And then we have a composer I've never heard of, Gabriel Ercoreca, who's Spanish apparently, despite that name. I don't know how that happens, but his two concertos by him. That should be pretty interesting. Yeah, so we'll find out.
Sounds good. On the jazz side, I've got some variety. We're going to hear guitarist Alexander Brott, Leon's Lullaby on Fresh Sound Records, and that also features bass clarinet, so that drew my ear, and that's going to be one to check out. Also, more trumpet, a debut recording, Zachary Finnegan, Guidance and Gratitude, that's on Shifting Paradigm Records. And we're also going to check out Steve Torre's new live album on Smoke Sessions Records, Sanyas.
Very nice.
So if you want to get listening to all those classical and jazz recordings while we are, the playlist will be up on Deezer shortly after this episode is published, and we'll have a link to it from our Facebook page as well. Any final comments, Mike?
Yeah, if Rick Beato is really worried about the state of music, he should be listening to the Adult Music Podcast.
He needs to broaden his concept of jazz and other styles. I'll leave him.
He likes it. He likes jazz. He's talked about it before.
Yeah,
so he does.
He's interviewed some big names in jazz, but
he's very old school though, as far as because he thinks the music of the past is always better than the music. And I tend to agree with him really, because songs in the past were more complicated, more interesting. They were different from each other. And we don't have that now, and at least not in popular music. But no. I think jazz, classical, everybody's unique. Yeah.
I feel sorry for him in a way because he really wants pop music to get better. But I think it's kind of like politics. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, especially in this internet or, sort of algorithm-driven age. Yeah. I mean, a good song would be left behind by the algorithm, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we've got you covered on the classical and jazz side, putting in the time to check out all of the new stuff that's going to slip through the algorithms. And if you want to spend your listening time on things that at least we think are really great recordings, come check us out every week.
Yeah, the problem is we're slipping through the algorithms too, so you'll have to find us.
That's true. But we've got another week at least of rain, so it's great listening weather here in the rainy season in Japan. Good time to stay indoors and check out as many recordings as possible. And we'll be back again with those other recordings next week on episode 172. So until then, keep listening, and we'll see you again next time.
Same difference. Two jazz fans, one jazz standard. A review of a single jazz standard through music, history, and stories. And this is AJ.
And this is Johnny.
If you are a jazz fan and you like jazz standards, bebop, show tunes, ballads, you name it.
Yeah, we've got them here. We drop a new show on you every other week, and we take a standard and we listen to a few different versions of it.
Same difference.
Come join the fun.
Looking forward to seeing you.